Space and arms race. They were important events that marked the period of tension between United States and the Soviet Union, known as the Cold War. It is called Cold War because there was no direct military confrontation between the two nuclear superpowers. The space race begins on October 4 of 1957 with the launch of Sputnik, the first world artificial satellite into Earth's orbit. In fact, the song that is in the background called A Russian Love Song by the Guns documents this achievement.
Dear old-fashioned Russian satellite war.
On November 3 of the same year, the Soviet Union launched Sputnik 2, a half-ton satellite that carried the first living thing into orbit. Her name was Laika, a female dog of 3 years old. This was a very important achievement for the Soviet Union and for the world, so they celebrate this with the song Satellite Number 2 by Carl Mann. This was a surprise for all the world and for United States, so they launched in 1958 its own satellite called Explorer 1. On July 29 of the same year, President Dwight Eisenhower signed a public order that created the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA, a federal agency dedicated to space exploration. On the other hand, in April 12 of 1961, the Soviet cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin became the first person to orbit Earth, traveling in the capsule like a spacecraft Vostok 1. The United States was also interested in sending a man into space, so NASA created a project called Project Mercury, and on May 5 of the same year, Alan Shepard climbed aboard Mercury Red Zone 3 and became the first person of America in space, but not in orbit. Later on, in February of 1962, Young Glenn became the first American to orbit Earth, and by the end of the year, the foundation of NASA lunar landing program named Project Apollo were in place. Meanwhile, the Soviets achieved in 1963 the first woman in space, Valentina Tereshkova, and also Alexei Leonov became the first human being to make a spacewalk. Later, on July 20 of 1969, the Apollo 11 arrived at the Moon. With this achievement for United States, Neil Armstrong and the pilot of the module, Edwin Aldrin, were the first men to step on the Moon. By the other hand, the Soviets on April 19 of 1971 launched into orbit Salyut 1, the first temporary space station in history. The final flight of the Apollo program was the first spaceflight in which a spacecraft from different nations docked in space. The docking module was designed jointly by the United States and the Soviet Union. With this mission and the handshake performed by Thomas Stafford and Alex Leonov, the space race comes to an end in July 17 of 1975. According to the BBC, the Soviet Union won the space race because they were the first to send a satellite to space, the first living being Laika, the first human, the first woman, and the first orbital station. In addition, many of the advances that are used today in the International Space Station are due to innovations of the Soviet Union. Arms race. In the arms race, the United States and the Soviet Union developed missiles that could carry nuclear weapons to others' territory. They backed opposing sides in regional conflicts around the world. The fear of the nuclear war crossed the population of both countries. This fear was so big that the United States implemented a commercial called Duck and Cover that said what should they do if an atomic attack happens.
And you duck and cover.
The arms race started on July 16 of 1945 with the Trinity test performed by the United States. Later on, in August 6 and 9, nuclear bombs were dropped in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. 4 years later, on August 29, the Soviet Union built its first nuclear bomb. Its codename was First Lightning. On November 1st of 1952, the United States successfully detonated Mike, the first hydrogen bomb in the world, and on 1954, they carried out the mission known as Operation Castor Bravo. It was the largest nuclear bomb ever tested by the United States. After this, the Soviets successfully threw their first hydrogen bomb on November 22 of 1955. 6 years later, they developed and tested the massive Tsar bomb on October 31 of 1961. It is the most powerful weapon ever detonated. With this event, the fear was so big that the song Fallout Shelter of Peter Scott reflects the possibility of an atomic attack.
I'm gonna lock my heart to keep out radiation. The kind you got could blow out a nation.
Then in October of 1962 happens the Cuban-Missile Crisis, which was the moment in which the two superpowers came closest to a nuclear war. After this, several treaties were signed to be at peace, but the people continue with fear. This can be seen with the song Russians from Sting that talks about a possibility of an atomic attack at any time. Finally, in 1991, USA and the Soviet Union signed the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty, which marked the end of the arms race. This race led to different consequences. For example, the human rights were affected. Article 1 with brotherhood, the Article 12 because they violated privacy, the Article 24 because the working people were overexploited, the Article 3 because the people felt so insecure during this, and even though Laika wasn't a human, we consider that her right to life was violated.